Attention all you rule breakers, you misfits and troublemakers, all you free spirits and pioneers, all you visionaries and nonconformists. Everything the establishment has told you is wrong with you is actually what's right with you. You see things others don't. You are hardwired to change the world.
You are listening to the Spiritual Activist Radio Show, and I am Rahasya Uncensored, where we look at the world not as it is, but as we know it can be, if and only if we have the courage to question the answers we've been given. This is our world, and it's time for us to take it back. Wow. This only goes by every 2 weeks. I have to do a podcast, and I know I should be doing more. This is Rahasya Uncensored on the BBS radio channel. My channel is Spiritual Activist. And today, I think I'm going to let you in a little bit of what's going on with me personally. And it's a little bit embarrassing, actually, in a lot of ways. But isn't that what this is about, is being honest with ourselves and others? I've been going through a tough time. And that's why today we're going to be going into mass formation psychosis. Because for about a year and a half, I've seen something really strange happening with my friends, acquaintances. I've noticed the emails change tone, the way people are reacting to me. I didn't take the vaccination. I'm healthy. I'm strong. I take all the zinc and vitamin D3. I live back in the woods, pretty much by myself almost, except for my wife and a really good friend. And I think that's sort of what I want to touch on today too. Yesterday, yeah, I noticed that I have a lot of pinned up anger, probably from fears that I'm not really addressing and processing right. And it came out at a really good friend of mine, and I just let him have it. Thank goodness he has a lot of patience, and but it's not fair. I have all my excuses for losing my control and all that, but none of the excuses any of us for making a friend feel bad. So it's really put me into a position where I'm thinking, how much am I involved, being sucked into this mass formation psychosis? Because I'm going to read an article I wrote for my magazine, The Lotus Guide. It'll be out in the next issue, which you can read online in about 2 weeks, something like that, on lotusguide.com. And I also put up a supportive page for my article, which is, and you can read this now, lotusguide.com/information warfare. And that's what this is. I mean, when Alex Jones said InfoWars, it's a perfect example of nailing it right on the head. So today, I want to talk about a little bit about myself, but not much. It's not about me. It's about what I'm seeing in the world. And I tell you, when I look out at the world right now, if I was a betting person, off-planet being, I would bet that we're not going to make it. But I'm a human being, so I have a little bit of biasness as far as that goes. But what has me concerned are, I have a really good friend. We've been friends for years, and I feel him backing away from me. And I'll be the first to admit, I'm a little bit tough to be around sometimes, especially if you're not informed about what's going on. I feel it's my duty as a human being to say what I think and really understand that I need to only speak what I really, really understand and has some basis to it. And my friend, after all the information I sent him, he went out, he got his vaccination, And now him and his wife, they've caught COVID after the vaccination, of course. Doesn't stop it. And that's what I was trying to tell him. And now I think he's holding a grudge against me for I don't know what. And maybe it's the mass formation thing. I don't know. Um, there's so much I don't understand right now, which it puts me in a strange position to start talking about what I'm talking about. But that's what I'm talking about. We don't understand what's going on. And I think once you come to grips with that, you can start from a good base level of opening up your mind to new information. What I have on the screen right now, for those of you who are watching, is Dr. Malone. And Dr. Malone was on the Joe Rogan show a while back. And if you go to that website, lotusguide.com/information warfare, I put that Spotify interview on that page, along with Dr. McCulloch. And they recently, Spotify got a letter, supposedly from 260 health professionals, which could be ambulance drivers or nurses or anybody, actually, candy stripers. 260 health professionals saying that they demand Spotify at least take off that show, but they'd like to take Joe Rogan off Spotify and deplatform him. I don't think that's going to happen. And the reason for that is because of this interview he did with Dr. Malone. And Dr. Malone is the inventor of the mRNA technology. And he's told us from the beginning, this is not what it was meant for. They're using it for something else that's a different subject altogether, and I don't have all the evidence. But what I do have evidence for is Dr. Malone is well credentialed, he's well peer reviewed, and he's part of an organization of not 260 health professionals, but 16,000 doctors and researchers and scientists that are trying to get the word out to people that, hey, at least think about this. I was reading some of the recent things that came out of England. And to the vaccine's credit, it seems like if you've had one vaccine, the first vaccine for the coronavirus, if you've had that, then you're a little bit more protected against a variant than a non-vaccine person. It's not much, but it's a little bit better. But if you've had the first booster, you're way worse off. Second booster, you're way worse off. And the point is even after that first vaccine, you're protected for, who knows? They say 6 months, but it starts waning after 3 months. So you're only protected for a little while, so you're going to have to get the booster. But the trouble is, once you get the booster, then the viability of what you're doing goes way down, and now you're starting to talk about immune responses. And it's just something we have to think about and talk about. Like right now, we can talk about this. I'll try to put this up on YouTube, but they're pretty tough. I mean, I've been taken off twice for saying things a year ago that now is on the news and everybody's saying it, but I don't know. Personally, this has been pretty tough for me, and I'm sure it's been pretty tough for a lot of you too. But right now, what I'd like to do is read the article that I wrote and comment along the way. The name of the article, that's my dog. I bring him to work with me. He's a puppy, believe it or not. He weighs 100 pounds. Mass formation psychosis. How do you know you are hypnotized? Well, the short answer for most people is you don't know you're hypnotized. And remember, this is an article that's going out to the community in my printed magazine, which I've had second thoughts about doing the way people are right now. But that's what the article is about, is people are so hypnotized that you can't even talk to them anymore. And here I am trying to talk to them. So Maybe I'm the one that's psychotic. I don't really know at this point. Um, okay, I warn you, the reader, that I will be bringing up topics that many of you will not understand, therefore probably disagree with. And that's what happens. If somebody doesn't understand you, they don't seek to even try to begin to understand you. They just disagree with you. And then they throw a lot of hyperbole out there to try to undermine you and come up with a lot of comments. I mean, recently Facebook was forced to admit that their fact checkers aren't facts at all. It's just ideas and perceptions that they've come up with, their own comments. But they call them fact checkers, but they were cornered on that and they had to confess. Somebody fact checked their fact checkers. This article is following up with previous articles, all of which can be read on the Lotus Guide website by searching Rahasya in the article section. For instance, are we tiptoeing towards totalitarianism? I think when I wrote that, that's probably a year and a half ago. I think it's become so obvious now that if you plot a course where we've been, where we are, and put your ruler down on a linear timeline, it's pretty easy to see that we're heading towards an authoritarian dictatorship of some kind. Nobody knows what kind that would be at this point. It would be some kind of a corporate takeover of governments on a global level, and that's what makes it difficult, because we don't have the linguistic terms and definitions to really define this. And if we did, they're going to go into Webster's dictionary and on Wikipedia and change the definitions anyway. So it's important that we talk about this stuff. And the other article was Mass Psychosis, aka Collective Insanity. And I was touching on it then because I hadn't really been able to come across mass formation psychosis and realize it's actually a real thing. As edgy as this article may seem to the initiated, trust me, I'm being wise with my words for obvious reasons, because if I'm not, they get you. I even misspell words in the online versions, just to keep the crazies away from their searching my articles for things. Before continuing, I would like to say something about where I'm coming from at this point in my life. Even though I would much rather be writing about spiritual consciousness, are we alone in the universe, and attempting to understand our true place in the world as humans, I sense an urgency to do what I can to help people wake up to the direction we are headed. For me, freedom is a direct expression of and from the spiritual realm, and anything that jeopardizes that freedom is in conflict, no matter what it is. This lies at the heart of why I feel such things as vaccine mandates must not happen. And I by the way, I think most of the world agrees with that. The people that don't agree with it is the fake news and the loud people in governments. But they're very few, very few. At the end of the day, freedom must stand. Our freedoms as citizens are under attack from many directions, especially freedom of speech. There's a reason that freedom of speech is, hang on, you can tell I'm not a complete professional. At the end of the day, freedom must stand. Our freedoms as citizens are under attack from many directions, especially freedom of speech. There's a reason that freedom of speech and the press is first, because if we lose that, all the rest will fall soon after. We need to speak out right now with our words and ideas, because the reason for the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, is in case the First Amendment is lost. None of us wants to get to that point. None of us. Because at that point, we all lose to some degree, because that would be a total reset. Mass formation psychosis is nothing new, just the name. Traditionally, around 30% of the people are in a deep trance that's being orchestrated by powerful people, governments, and elite families, and 30% for various reasons don't fall under the trance. I'm not concerned about either of these groups. The first group is incapable of waking up, incapable. And the second group will always value freedom more than security. It's the 40% in the middle that still has the ability to question and has some common sense that always decides the course of events. And that goes for elections too. It's that middle ground of 40%. You have maniacs on one side and imbeciles on the other side in elections that are so polarized to their party groups that it doesn't matter what you say. I mean, you can put up a president that has dementia. They don't care. You can put up a president that was a talk show host. They don't care. They just vote that way. But it's the 40% in the middle that I think we need to be concerned with, because that could decide the direction that we're going to go. I will be touching on many subjects, and due to the lack of space, will not be including references. The supporting evidence will be found at lotusguide.com/information warfare with links and videos of what I'm referring to. If you don't go to the trouble to visit and research the supporting evidence, then you really don't want to know what's going on and what is coming. And I probably should have said what is here. Sorry for being blunt, but the days of being subtle to spare people's feelings are long gone. Long gone. Even though they're trying to make us spare the feelings of pedophiles by changing what we call them. It's so ridiculous. What about the feelings of the children they molest? What opened my eyes to the hypnotic state that most people live in was when I was doing research for my book, To Believe or Not to Believe, the Social and Neurological Consequences of Belief Systems. It's available on Amazon, by the way. That's my plug for the day. The book is based around a quote I once read by Voltaire. If they can make you believe in absurdities, they can make you commit atrocities. After many interviews with researchers and scientists from fields ranging from neuroscience and evolutionary biology to some of the greatest spiritual and conscious thinkers of our time, I realized what nation states and governments realized centuries ago. It's the exact same neural networks that are created when believing something without evidence and conflicts with all human logic and understanding, absurd, that end up being the same exact neural networks that allow a person to commit atrocities like dying on the battlefield, murdering tens of thousands of women for cooking with herbs, or someone like Pol Pot, who was able to get 2/3 of the population of Cambodia to murder 1/3 of the population for being able to read and write, which eventually degenerated into anyone who wore glasses, because he considered people who wore glasses intellectual and maybe a little smarter than him. But they couldn't have been too smart, because when they came for him, they should have taken their glasses off, it seems to me. But this information has been known by the elites all the way back to the Roman Empire and earlier. But we're talking about history now. We are looking at this played out in our world today. Why do you think we're being told one thing one day, another thing the next? Don't wear a mask, wear a mask. Don't wear a mask if you're vaccinated, wear 2 masks, etc. It goes on and on. And they also said that the vaccinations would completely protect you. Well, no, not quite. You got to get a booster, and that'll protect you. No, not quite. You got to get 2 boosters. Oh, no, not quite. You got to get 3 boosters. Well, no, not. I mean, honestly, I'm trying to think of a polite way of saying this, but at this point, you have to be an imbecile, a complete moron, to not see that something is going on a lot more intense than the virus. I mean, now at the beginning of the administration of Biden, he said he would completely eradicate the virus, the flu. No one has been able to eradicate even the common cold, let alone the flu. It always mutates before you can grab it. I mean, if you could get every single person on the planet, almost 8 billion people, and within 10 minutes, vaccinate them all. Theoretically, I guess you could kill that one virus, but that's not going to happen. I mean, come on. Okay, this is what I mean. You notice the frustration in my voice. A lot of people mistake that for anger, but sometimes it's just frustration. I feel like I'm living in a mental institution right now. This is why one of my videos was removed from YouTube. I played all the conflicting statements made by Dr. Fauci. Then there's 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And here we are 2 years later with one vaccine will protect you. No, wait. You need a booster. No, wait. You need 2 boosters. And on it goes. It's no wonder people no longer trust our leaders or our government for that matter. If you can even call it our government anymore, I'm not too sure you can. It's more of a corporate state. If you watch the revolving doors, all of the boards of all of the pharmaceutical companies are one time or another in the government. And most of the people in the government have sat on the boards of pharmaceutical companies and or now some of the tech giants. It's like we've let the fox go up and protect our chickens. It doesn't work too good. By the way, for those of you who know a little about this technique, it's straight out of MK Ultra playbook, which played a major role in one of the alphabet agencies. I didn't want to mention which agency that was in the article. It's the CIA, of course. You know the organization that has been responsible for smuggling more drugs into this country than all the cartels combined. People don't realize that. The CIA started smuggling way back, right after World War II in the mid-50s. And then it really ramped up during the Vietnam War with smuggling in tons and tons of opium. And that's what caused the opium epidemic with the black people. And there's even a CIA paper saying that that was the plan, to funnel this opium, heroin, into the black communities to basically tear them apart. I mean, this is freedom of information paperwork that's out there if anybody wants to do their own research. But I warn you, you're going to end up feeling like I do, a little bit frustrated. How can all this go on and no one says anything? And if you say something, sometimes they get on your case and start trying to cause you problems for saying the simple facts, the truth. I mean, there's people that's, and this is another thing too, folks. And this is what gets me about not really speaking out and protecting our military, the people in the military that's having a tough time. And they're starting to speak out and getting fired. And, I mean, look at Tucker Carlson. He was talking to the lieutenant colonel or something, a young kid, I mean, 17 years in there, and he just put out a little video saying, hey, you know, what's going on in this withdrawal from Afghanistan is wrong. This is not the way to do it. And, you know, got all kinds of trouble. Now he's not in, he lost his pension and everything else. But, you know, the point is that there are people losing everything. They're risking it all to tell us what's going on. And we owe it to them to turn off Netflix and listen to this stuff and really understand the depth of our situation right now. People have died over this information that I'm going over just in this article. You know, hundreds of thousands of people have died because they've been wrapped up in this mass formation psychosis with governments. And our government, we shouldn't be afraid of our government. It should be afraid of us. Somebody said that, Voltaire or somebody. So let's go on. So exactly what is mass formation psychosis? I keep doing this, sorry. Mass formation psychosis that social scientists and people like Dr. Malone are talking about. First off, the Reuters fact checkers say that this term is not recognized in academic circles. Oh, big surprise there, huh? Or the field of psychology. Oh, big surprise there. Which actually means very little at this point. The reason it means very little is that all these people do is lie to us. Um, I'd rather look at the facts and check it out. But a note of interest here is that the fact checkers at routers are also hired by Twitter to fact check tweets. So need I say more? There's my dog again. The truth is that we all live in, to some extent, uncharted territory. We are all in uncharted territory, but simple observation can tell anyone with an average IQ that is able to disassociate from the collective narrative and think for themselves that something very strange is going on our planet. Now, I've given this a lot of thought, and I know that they're orchestrating it really well. Um, they're orchestrating it very well, and they have it down with AI. But I sometimes wonder if off-planet beings has a hand in this. Because think about it, they've been showing up a lot this past decade. And with AI and some of these beings supposedly not carbon-based, but silicon-based, it has to make you at least wonder. I mean, isn't that what it's about, is to think about these things and give a little bit of consideration to out-of-the-box things? Because we're out of the box, people. We no longer are in the box at all. So to me, it's obvious that something is going on our planet. And here in the article, I'm saying I don't want to get into the gender thing because I would be accused of being transphobic. And in fact, anything I might say would be ridiculed by misinformed people, which in fact would be an example of what I'm writing about. But that's because they're in psychotic states. But let me say this. There are over 78 different gender pronouns now that sound as crazy as the people who are propagating them look. And when I say that, I mean these people, look at them on TikTok. They look absolutely crazy. This subject lacks the credibility and common sense to even write about it, and with so many really important things at stake. But I have to say this about the gender thing. I mean, should I even say anything? I even said on the article I shouldn't say anything, but it's so ridiculous. And the truth be told, I don't care if you're homosexual. I don't care if you're transgender. I don't care if you're pretending that you're a man when you're a woman, or vice versa. I don't care what you do in your bedroom or in the privacy of your own environment. What I care about is my freedom. I shouldn't be forced through legislation to call you Zen or Zot or Zoop or Zippity Doodah or whatever it is that's the gender thing of the day right now. That's where I have to draw a line. And I'm not going to go for the government now telling me that I have to call you a certain thing. Otherwise, I'm transphobic and against everybody. Oh my God. Okay, so back to the definition of mass formation psychosis. According to Dr. Matthias Desmet, professor of psychology who holds a master's degree in statistics, there are 4 conditions that need to be present to create mass formation psychosis. Now here's where it gets, pay attention here. There's 4 steps, and you tell me if we haven't been doing these things. Step 1, there needs to be a lot of socially isolated people, or people who experience a lack of social bond. Hence the big push to get people on social media platforms and watch Netflix. And now they want you to go into an alternate meta universe by putting on a mask and completely disappearing from this world. That's going to, I don't know how they get people to do all this, to be honest with you. But it's a progressive, incremental steps that they've been taking. That's number one, and that's happened. I mean, I still meet people that tell me, no, I'm social. I have 4,000 friends on Facebook, and they haven't even met any of them. People who experience a lack of sense making, unable to come to sensible conclusions. This is where mixed messages come in. How many of us at the beginning of this have said, this doesn't make any sense? I mean, I remember saying that, and all my friends saying, this doesn't make sense what they're doing. But little by little, I see about half of the people I knew then being sucked into this, and they can't even remember. Trust me when I tell you this, they can't even remember saying that this doesn't make sense. It totally makes sense to them now, and it always has. You tell me that that's not a mental problem. That's step two. Step three, there is a lot of free-floating anxiety. Free-floating because there's nothing to connect their anxiety to. No focal point, unable to identify the cause, and so no way to deal with it. And I put on here a great example of this is when you put a rat on a metal plate and shock it. It becomes confused and highly anxious, but when you put another rat in there with it, they both focus on the other as the subject and cause of the shocks and start fighting to relieve their anxiety. I mean, does this sound familiar? I mean, we're all being shocked daily by this and that and the other, and we're blaming each other. They've separated us into, I mean, racism. I think we were doing a good job in this country. That we weren't there yet, Don't get me wrong, I'm not a white racist. We weren't there. And black people have a long ways to go, and we were getting there. Under Trump, they were making more money. They were getting more housing. Everything was going in the right direction. The only thing that was a division was in our politics. The Democrats just absolutely went crazy when Trump came about. He just drove them crazy. Number four, there's a lot of free-floating psychological discontent. People may experience their daily lives as lacking any purpose or meaning. Suicide rates are at an all-time high. Depression is running through our society, and upwards of 80% of Americans are on some kind of pharmaceutical, which in my opinion is actually part of the plan. Now here's where so I think you can see all those steps. They've taken place in our country and on the planet. People are so anxious and have so much anxiety, and it's free floating because they have nowhere to point it. That's the reason what they're doing now is the unvaccinated is the other rat they've thrown in on the plate. And unvaccinated are being blamed when the science actually doesn't say that at all. At all. And here I tell people, I implore you to visit lotusguide.com/information warfare to drill down deeper into this, because it is the exact precondition for a society to be in that opens the door to a totalitarian regime. Where this becomes dangerous is after these conditions are met, any group of people who know about social engineering can simply give that society something to focus on, like witches, or people who wear glasses, or a pandemic targeting unvaccinated as the cause, even though research shows clearly that this is not the case. That focus, whatever it is, becomes the object of the society's anxiety and fear, and anyone who disagrees becomes the enemy and must be destroyed to help alleviate the anxiety. This is very basic social engineering we are talking about here. There's nothing that hasn't played out in history with horrific results, only to be recognized later after the damage is done. Now, stop and think about that. I mean, right now, I don't agree with what the government is doing. And I base that on science, on statistics and facts. And it's all, the narrative is unraveling now. But my point is if they would ever target me and my uh, magazine, because my magazine is Alternative Health, I would be considered a domestic terrorist. I mean, how in the hell does that happen? How in the hell did I end up living in a country that I love dearly? And if they landed on the shores, if the Chinese came at Long Beach, which I actually think they are right now, uh, most of the ocean containers and everything else, it's a different kind of war. But I would fight to protect the American way of life and other Americans, other people. I would fight. I love this country. But how do we get to that, to being a domestic terrorist for disagreeing with political agendas that are actually global in nature? Man, it's sometimes I look at myself and everything I'm going through and see what other people are going through, and I understand why people are so discombobulated because they're being played like puppets by very intelligent um, social engineering masters. And they have a playbook. I mean, they've done this through time. It goes all the way back to the Sumerians, Mesopotamia, and look what Constantine found out when he was losing the Roman Empire. It dawned on him, oh my God, all I have to do is pretend like I'm a Christian and get all the Christians on board because, hey, they're the ones that goes out on the battlefield and dies for God and country. I think my God, haven't we evolved enough to see the insanity of that? I mean, it would be nice if we could go around the global campfire and sing Kumbaya and all the races would be there. We would just be loving and holding hands, but that's not the case because that's not what's happening. We're being ruled by globalists with an agenda to take this population down. Go to Agenda 21, Agenda 30. They're very clear about what they want to happen. I don't know if I mentioned this in here, but think about it. Bill Gates, I think I do mention it in here. Let me just continue on. Yeah, let's just continue on here. So let's talk about later and where this is heading. If we don't start understanding the end game and where this is headed, we don't stand a chance. We don't stand a chance in hell, which is where we're going to end up. I remember David Icke telling my wife and me at dinner a while back that if you want to understand the journey, you need to understand the destination. Well, the destination or goal is complete global dominance over every detail of human lives, including our finances, which is already happening with banks reporting any transaction over $600. I mean, how's that going to? They say they're after the big money people. We all make transactions over $600 just to pay the rent. They're not after the big money people. They're after all of us. There's also and it's going to make this another thing too that people don't seem to understand. With that in place, banks are telling the Federal Reserve and the government, if you make us have to look at every transaction and report every transaction over $600, we're going to have to hire so many more people, so much more software, and we can't do it. We can't do it. And they will go out of business. But that's what the government and the big banks want. They want to put down all of these credit unions and small local banks and consolidate all of their strength into the Federal Reserve and the banking settlements level of control. So there is also the complete rewriting of definitions, which they are doing on Wikipedia to the point that it is a useless website at this point, as well as changing definitions in the Merriam-Webster dictionary like anti-vaxxer to include anyone who is against the mandates. That has nothing to do, wake the hell up, people. That has nothing to do with being an anti-vaxxer, not wanting to be told to take a vaccine that's actually being tested on you. It's an experimental treatment. It's not even a vaccine. They keep it under the mandates of a vaccine to keep them out of the way of being sued by people, which is why, by the way, I don't know if you know this, that's why they're not vaccinating or insisting on vaccinating the people coming across the border, the illegal immigrants, or as they're known in New York, they call them legal non-citizens now. How can you be a legal, illegal immigrant? This is what I mean by the MK Ultra. This is what they do. They play with your mind, and your mind has no place to stand where it's solid. Anyway, to go on. Then how about the fact that we can no longer use the term pedophile because it causes emotional distress, so we must use the term minor attracted person to protect the sensibilities of a child molester. A child molester that has destroyed the youth of some child. How about that little kid's, how about its sensibilities and what's important to it? Him or her, I shouldn't even say it. See what I mean? They get into your head, and now I've objectified even these small kids that are being molested by minor attracted persons. Oh my God. I can't believe I feel like I'm in the Twilight Zone sometimes. Or how about we can no longer call a woman a mother and must now be called birthing person. I've even heard them referred to as menstrual people, people that menstruates. Because, wait for it, men can breastfeed and give birth. Oops, I'm sorry. That's called chest feeding now. Okay. Oh my God. When's the last time you seen a man breastfeed a child? I'm willing to bet, unless you watch YouTube, there's a couple of grotesque men. One's breastfeeding a baby. With the exception of YouTube, I'm willing to think that probably, maybe, I don't think anybody's seen a man breastfeed, now that I think about it. We wouldn't have even thought about that 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Matter of fact, 3 years ago, matter of fact, I get into this. Any normal person alive 3 years ago would think this is a complete nonsense and society would never allow a small group of people to dictate how we should live and talk. I've never had a problem with people living lives that I don't necessarily agree with. Matter of fact, I've lived lives that other people probably wouldn't agree with. What I have a problem with is when I'm being forced to pretend it's normal when a biological male is actually a female now because he identifies as being a female. Now, this came up in Virginia, and the governor lost the race there because a male put on a skirt, pretending he was a female, went into the female bathroom, I think it was in junior high or high school, and raped a girl. And he had done it before, and I think he did it even after that. And they hid it. They suppressed that because they didn't want to lose their woke governor. But thank God parents finally showed up and just made that not happen. And now they have a new governor. He hasn't even been sworn in yet, and he's being blamed for what happened on Highway 95. He hasn't even been sworn in, but it's his fault somehow. And the parents that went to that meeting, the FBI started looking into them as domestic terrorists. Can you believe that? I mean, if we don't stop this, people, it's not going to end up in a good place. That's all I can say. If you can't see what is happening and the insanity being programmed into us, then you are suffering from mass formation psychosis according to the best and brightest minds in the world. And before you listen to one more word in the media or from our politicians, read Robert Kennedy Jr.'s book, The Real Anthony Fauci. Mark my words, there will come a time when Fauci gets thrown under the bus, along with many others who have become too much of a liability. Bill Gates, for instance, made billions of dollars selling inferior software, actually stealing most of it, and actually trying to create a monopoly. And now he's in control of the global health decisions and the World Health Organization. It gets far worse. There's my dog again. It gets far worse from here. But I don't want to completely destroy your day, so enough for today. Visit my webpage and details backing this up. And if you're listening to this on BBS Radio, you already know where that's at. And if not, it's at bbsradio.com/spiritual activist. And I'm starting to promote my Rumble channel, which is rumble.com/user/Rahasya Uncensored, and I'm putting articles up on Substack, and because it's only a matter of time before they take my YouTube away, unless the YouTube, I don't know, becomes enlightened. That could happen, I guess, huh? We have 15 minutes, about 12 minutes. Let me play something for you here. Now, what you're going to be listening to, it's only about 4 minutes. It's Greg Reese. He does some really good 4 and 5 minute things. This is about mass formation psychosis.
When you have a society that has become decoupled from each other and has free-floating anxiety in a sense that things don't make sense, we can't understand it. And then their attention gets focused by a leader or a series of events on one small point, just like hypnosis.
This is Dr. Malone speaking that I was mentioning earlier. Another guy, too, is Dr. Mercola. Look him up. And you can get a lot of this on band.video. Granted, it's Alex Jones, but, I mean, more and more people are saying, you know, Alex Jones was right. I don't see how he does what he does, to be honest with you.
They literally become hypnotized and can be led anywhere.
Mass psychosis, also known as group mind, mob mentality, or herd mentality. Before modern civilization, we lived in herds, and in order to survive in the herd, we conformed to the herd. This is where mass psychosis all stems from. The most popular examples of explaining mass psychosis are typically angry mobs and violent riots, but these are merely the end results. Mass psychosis begins when the individual mind starts to identify as a member of a group based on any unifying factor. The unifying factor doesn't even need to make sense. For many people, the feeling of unity is enough. Our ego mind innately craves acceptance, and by default, will instinctively conform to whatever group it perceives to be the majority. In order to successfully conform to the group, the individual must put aside personal intuition and follow the guidance of the group. This makes a person highly controllable and spiritually stifles the individual, which causes them to crave group acceptance even more. Man's disposition for mass psychosis has been written about for millennia, most notably in ancient scripture and philosophy. And we all experience this as human beings, whether we reflect upon it or not.
What he was talking about there is Plato. And think about this. Plato was talking about the mass psychosis that people are under, and the allegory of the shadows on the cave wall is what he was saying was most people think that that is reality. And if you think that's reality, you're at the puppeteers are just going to play with you and laugh at your suffering. But this has been talked about for millennia.
Plato argued that due to the nature of group mind, democracy always leads to tyranny and subjugation. His concern was the lack of good leadership, and philosophized on ways of solving this. In 1895, Gustave Le Bon published The Crowd, wherein he explains the key processes for cultivating mass psychosis: anonymity, contagion, and suggestibility. This work is known to have influenced world leaders businesses, and tyrants, of which the ethics has been written about for decades. And yet, AP and Reuters outrageously claim that mass psychosis does not exist, when it is in fact the corporate media apparatus to which they belong that makes this all possible, waging psychological warfare against a group of the population who believes the media would never lie to them. This is why the term mass psychosis is arguably a better term than group mind or mob mentality. A change in the field of consciousness occurs, a devolution from divine inspiration into primitive hierarchy.
Now, when he says field of consciousness, keep that in mind, because this is what people like Rupert Sheldrake talks about, the morphic field, not only around beings, but around the planet. Once that morphic field gets polluted and sick, if you're even close to that frequency, you're going to be pulled into it through entrainment. That's a whole nother science in itself. And I think that's what's happening. These people have got into the morphic field, and that gets into another subject with the CIA and what they've been doing with portals and going through gateways into other dimensions and creating alternative linear universes. And I mean, we're dealing with something that's way beyond our grasp right now. And I think the best we can do is really pay attention. And maybe it's too late. I know people say, well, we're getting close to the cliff. I don't know. I think maybe we're over the cliff. Now we're in free fall. And if you're in free fall, there's only two things to do. Three, you could land on the rocks and die. Or two, you could find a soft place to land and maybe, not get hurt too bad, or learn to fly. I think number two is probably the best alternative.
Which has no place in a civilized society. And yet, here we are. Without mass psychosis, today's leaders would have no power. Just like advertising, everything about politics is about cultivating mass psychosis. Whereas the individual pursuit of happiness has inevitably led to beauty and innovation, creating and controlling groups of people, which has been the biggest power play on Earth for all of recorded history, almost always leads to death and destruction. The science and study of mass psychosis could be used to enlighten humanity by educating the individual about the power and potential of the human mind. But today, the very same corrupt media being used by wealthy elites to divide and enslave us says there is no such thing as mass psychosis. Mass psychosis is humanity's burden to outgrow. It is why we accept the lesser of two evils. Many of us are well aware of the frailty of man and the civilized world. The great psychologist Carl Jung's warning to the world was that the individual must come face to face with their own shadow. In order to accomplish this, one must liberate themselves from the collective. And until enough of us do, society will continue to be led by tyrants and ignorant mobs. Reporting for InfoWars, this is Greg Reese.
Now, I want to play one more thing, and that's going to take us right up to the top of the hour, but I think it's important to understand what's been going on in our Congress with Fauci. And trust me, buy that book, The Real Dr. Fauci. I've talked with Robert Kennedy Jr. here in Paradise, and this is way before this is happening. He was telling me about what's coming. These people know. They know. Let's get into this, because you got to hear this. This is from Project Veritas.
Senator, with all due respect, I disagree with so many of the things that you've said. You're still unwilling to admit that they gained in function, they gained in lethality. According to the definition that is currently operable, we're not going to get anywhere close to trying to prevent another lab leak of this dangerous sort of experiment. You won't admit that it's dangerous, and for that lack of judgment, I think it's time that you resign.
Project Veritas has obtained never-before-seen military documents regarding the origins of COVID-19, gain-of-function research, vaccines, potential treatments which have been suppressed, and the government's effort to conceal all of this. Dr. Anthony Fauci has testified many times before Congress stating that the U.S. government was never involved in gain-of-function research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
Will you today finally take some responsibility for funding gain-of-function research in Wuhan?
No.
Senator, with all due respect, I disagree with so many of the things that you've said. First of all, gain of function is a very nebulous term.
But the thing is you're still unwilling to admit that they gained in function when they say they became sicker. They gained in lethality. It's a new virus. That's not gain of function?
According to the definition that is currently operable,
we're not going to get anywhere close to trying to prevent another lab leak of this dangerous sort of.
According to the definition, catch what he said. He changed the definition on his website.
Experiment. You won't admit that it's dangerous, and for that lack of judgment, I think it's time that you resign.
You have said that I'm unwilling to take any responsibility for the current pandemic. I have no responsibility for the current pandemic.
That assertion is based on the NIH's definition of gain of function. However, the documents we've obtained refute that. The documents in question stem from a report of the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, better known as DARPA, which were hidden in a top-secret share drive. But what is DARPA? They are an agency under the U.S. Department of Defense, which facilitates research and technology with potential military applications. Dr. Stephen Walker was the director of DARPA at the time of the EcoHealth Alliance proposal. A source sent us this video of Dr. Walker talking about research they were exploring related to mRNA technology
Now listen to this.
and its potential application with military personnel in the field.
DARPA, about 5 or 6 years ago, we stood up an office called the Biotechnology Office. And the real purpose of that was to understand how biology worked and then build, design, build, and test cycles where you could engineer microorganisms to do things that you want to do.
Though the main report regarding the EcoHealth Alliance,
They're telling us what they're doing. They're telling us what they're doing. If we're like a bunch of little kids in the house and the adults are at the table, you just have to walk over to the table and listen to what the adults are talking about.
proposal leaked on the internet a couple of months ago, it has remained unverified until now. Project Veritas has obtained a separate report to the Inspector General of the Department of Defense, written by the U.S. Marine Corps Major Joseph Murphy, a former DARPA fellow. Major Murphy makes claims in his report to the Inspector General that, if true, could be damning to the official narrative that has been played out to the world over the past 2 years. Major Murphy's report states that EcoHealth Alliance approached DARPA in March 2018, seeking funding to conduct gain-of-function research of bat-borne coronaviruses. The proposal was named Project Diffuse. DARPA rejected the proposal because the work was too dangerous and could violate the gain-of-function moratorium, despite EcoHealth's position that it would not.
Now, for DARPA to turn this down because it's too dangerous, we're talking about the government organization that militarizes all kinds of things, does questionable, really questionable ethical decisions on what they're doing. And they turned this down, and Dr. Fauci went ahead with it.
According to the documents, the NIAID, under the direction of Dr. Fauci, did not reject the proposal. They went ahead with the research of Wuhan and several sites across the U.S. Dr. Fauci has repeatedly maintained his position, under oath, that the NIH and NIAID have not been involved in gain-of-function research with the EcoHealth Alliance program. This appears to be contradictory to Major Murphy's analysis and the rejection from the Biological Technologies Office at DARPA. Major Murphy's report goes on to detail great concern over the COVID-19 gain-of-function program, the concealment of documents, the suppression of potential curatives like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine.
Now, hydroxychloroquine, this is what they got all over President Trump about, talking about. I'm going to cut that off, so I have a couple minutes here to talk. For those of you who are watching this, every issue I put out a comic strip in the Lotus Guide, and this one is a picture of a pharmacy. For those of you who are listening to this, with a sign that says, "Looters and shoplifters must wear a mask before entering. It's the law." That's just to point out the hypocrisy that we're all in right now. And we need to really look at this and start realizing that this is complete insanity, because if we don't pull ourselves out of this, it's not going to end well. So, and I think it's going to end well. And I want to talk about that in one of our shows too. But right now, it's really important to talk about some of these things. So, if you want to make a donation to what I'm doing, because I don't run commercials, you can go to lotusguide.com/donations. And it's a safe place to make a credit card donation or whatever you want to do through PayPal. And that's how I make money on this stuff. And I wish I didn't have to make money. I don't know why multi-billionaires don't support people like myself and so many others out there. But for now, I guess that's it for today, and I'll see you in a couple weeks. Thank you very much for your time. I know it's valuable, and I try to make the information worthwhile. Thank you.